Hey guys, I want to show you how to use a styling library called Styled Components. Now this is a React library that helps you write CSS on your components and styling them and make it easier to build styled components and use them throughout your application. So normally how you would add CSS or style for example, some components is maybe something like this, where you have a div here and then you have the class name and you import a CSS file. So right here we just have regular CSS. We can see everything that's going on is regular, and then we import that, and then we use the class names that we write in our CSS, and then that gets that style. Or sometimes you might see inline styles using the style property, and here I can say like the color I want, so I can say color is red. So that's another way you can do it. Or you can use, there's a number of different libraries that help with styling, and one of them is called Styled Components, and here's what that looks like. So here's what an example of using, there's no styled components on this page. All there is me using styled components. So you can see I'm using a theme provider here, but I have a button, wrapper, and header text, which are all components. They're all styled components, and I'm using them right here. Now these are really nice, and you'll notice how there's no HTML code here. That's very important, and I'll explain why a little bit later. But what this library really promotes is keeping your components separate from basically your logic, which I really like. So the idea is to create what's called basically container classes, where you do your data fetching, or you're putting together different components and basically separating your presentational view from your logic. So all of these are presentational components, and I'm using them in this little app2.js component. And so let's look at what these actually look like. So we're going to start with the wrapper component. So this is a styled component So you'll notice how I'm doing style.div, and I have these backticks, and this is actually CSS. So what this does is it creates a div object, and it applies this CSS to it, and then it returns it. So we don't need that anymore. But for app2, when I am using it here, this is actually, you can think of as a div with the styles that are right here. So that's really cool. And now you'll notice, if you've tried styled components before, I have this color coded, so that might throw you off. There's an extension you can use called Visual Studio Styled Components, and you get syntax highlighting, if you're wondering why this is highlighted here, because usually this is not, because this is a string. But anyway, you can now write CSS for your component, which is really cool, for your components, which is really cool because now you can do some things. If you have used React a lot and have used the inline styles, you might have noticed how, hey, they don't have, like, for example, media queries. You can't do, like, in my app over here, I cannot do style and pass in like a media query into that. So I have to actually write it in CSS. So instead of, for example, doing div and giving a class name and like sharing styles like that, now what you would do is you would use this wrapper component all over the place instead of saying div class name wrapper. So that's what you're doing instead, and I'll explain in a second why I really like that. So that's what this looks like, and I want to show a little bit more what else you can do with this library. This is a basic example with only CSS and nothing funky is going on with the CSS, and we are just creating a div. Now the cool thing about this is you're pretty much replacing, if you ever use Sass before, anything that gives you CSS power, you're using basically JavaScript instead. So you'll notice in my app2 I have header text right here, and I have a button, and in my button here I have the primary prop on this. And let me just show you what this looks like real quick. So my primary here is a green button, and my other one, my regular without primary, is blue. And if we come over here to the button component, you'll notice how I'm changing that is with this string template right here. So I'm grabbing the props. So you'll notice anywhere that you want to do basically a variable in your CSS with the styled component, you'll notice I'm using style.button. So the way you actually use this library is you say style.whatever component you want. Anchor tag, image, div, h2, any of that stuff. And that's how you do it. And then you pass it a string like this. Backticks you have to add. And then right here you'll notice how I'm doing a string template, or basically adding a JavaScript logic in here. So I'm grabbing the props, and they'll take a function, and you'll always do it like this. So the props are getting passed in. I'm grabbing the props primary. If it's true, I show this color, otherwise I show this color. So super simple, and that's how you see it works over here. And that's why this one is one color and this is another color. But you notice the rest of it, nothing special going on, regular CSS. But now I can do this for anything, right? If I want to maybe change how the text is aligned, maybe I don't want text aligned center, I could then put another one right here, and I could say props, and I say props.primary, and then I can say whatever I want here, center, or otherwise it could be something else. I don't know, is the top the other one? I don't know what the other things you can actually plug into this are, but you can add these anywhere in the CSS, which is really cool. So center. Okay, so that is how you add, basically based on the props, how you can pass in and change how the style is looking. So that's pretty cool, and that gives you an edge, right? You can't do that with your class name. If I was doing this with a class, I would probably have to do like class name. You've probably have seen this before, like button primary is like how you would do this in Bootstrap. So now I'm just able to say button and then primary on it. Lastly, I want to show you theming. So this is something you can do with header. I'm doing with header text. You'll notice I have a theme and I have the font. So I have a theme provider here that's wrapping. And when you have a theme provider that you have on the outer layer, any style component inside of this knows about the theme. So in my styled components, I can then see what the theme is and grab the values. So here's my theme where I have a font. So in my header text here, my font family, you'll notice this is an H1 HTML tag. My font family, I'm grabbing, and notice how I'm doing props.theme. So that's how you grab the theme, and then you can get any of the things from the theme. So I have font here, so I want to grab the font, and that's how you pass in this. So you'll notice how I have two header texts, and they are both getting this font here. But I could easily change this, and then they both change to Arial, a different font. So that's pretty cool. And this is basically local. And what I mean by that is I can take this theme provider and I could just wrap one header text, and I could put another header text down here. So right now these would both be the same, right? Because I'm using the same theme for both. And this works. We can see it working right here. What I can do is I can create two themes. So this is theme 2, and we're going to use Arial for this font. And I can pass the theme 2 into this theme provider. So now this is the same header text component, right? But now it's going to be two different fonts depending on the theme provider that's around it. So that's pretty cool, and you can see there's plenty of implications with this. Sorry about that. That you can do. So I can't. It's not just font. I can pass in color. This can be anything, by the way. This is any arbitrary key. So I could call this Bob if I wanted to. But then in my header text over here, I would do theme.bob. What matters is what you're passing this string into here. So we can see that still works. But of course, you want to use good naming. But now I can have multiple different themes, or replace everything in all the styling in the application at once by changing this. So you can see how this can kind of be like Sass, where if you've used Sass or any like CSS preprocessor, where you can kind of globally have settings that you can alter. So I want to change the font across my application, I can, or across part of it. So that's really nice. And a powerful thing about styled components is grabbing these props. And I can mash this, right? I can use theme in here. I could also say like overwrite this. I could check if like props.font is supplied, and if it is, that's what we do. Otherwise we show that. And in my app over here I could just say font is equal to Arial, and so this should resolve to true, and then we're going to show props.font. So we are overwriting the font right there. So there's all kinds of things that you can do with this. It's super powerful. So I'm really liking this. I'm actually converting an application I'm using right now to using styled components because I'm really enjoying it. And the thing that I like most about them is you'll notice how there's no HTML here. So this is not HTML specific. So what I'm going to start doing is create my whole application like this and have only my HTML and basically like a components folder like this where I create a bunch of different components and then I use them in these these components, which I'm basically calling container components. And this is where I'm going to do my data fetching and all my logic. And what this will allow me to do is I create it on React on the web once, and then what I want to do is have it use this same logic for React Native. So I can also use it on basically create the same version of my website on an app. So what I would do is I would just re-implement how I want the button to look on the phone, how the header text looks on the phone, how the wrapper looks on the phone. So I only implement these components because they're different on the phone, but I keep all the logic the same. I still want my page to look like this on the phone. Maybe you want to change this up on the phone, of course, but your logic, what you're fetching, that might be the same. So you want to share that. So that's what I'm going to be experimenting with, is using styled, because styled components can work for React Native as well. So using that with to style both web and React Native, and then creating these components that now work. Like this will work for React Native and for React. So that's really exciting, and like being able to share code between those would be amazing. So that's what I'm going to be testing out in the near future, and I'll let you know how that goes, if it goes well and I'm able to share a lot of the code, or if there's some things that I'm missing that I don't know about. But whether or not that works, it's great just using styled components for the web too. So if you haven't tried out this library, highly recommend it. That's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. The code is up on GitHub.